Hi everyone, I'm John Blischak, and I'm here with Mauro Lepore to show you guys some basics of using Git and GitHub to collaborate and to contribute to open source projects. So what we're going to do in this short demo is Mauro is going to create a repository, add some files, and then what I'm going to do is fork that repository and make a contribution via pull request. And it's okay if that doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now. We're going to go through the whole process. So Mauro's going to share a screen and get started.
Thank you. Okay, I'm now sharing my screen. Can you see my GitHub profile here?
Yep.
Perfect. So the first thing I could do is go to the plus symbol here at the top right to find the option that says new repository, the first one here. And I'm gonna name it, say, rcollab git. That's a reasonable name for the purpose of this repo. I think the defaults look good. I'm gonna first make the screen a little bigger. So what we have just done here is added a name to the repo, and I have also made sure that the repo is going to be associated to, in this case, my user account. And I say this because I also belong to a number of organizations, but in particular, I want this repo to live under my user account. So if you have more than one option, you should check that you have the one that you like. I think that the settings here look good to me. I want this repo to be public, and I don't want to add anything else. So I would be ready to click Create Repository. Is that okay, John? Is that what you think makes sense? Perfect. So then I will go ahead and click the green button. GitHub, if you didn't notice so far, it specializes in big green buttons that tell you, yes, that's the right next thing to do. So we land on this screen that might look a little ugly, but contains a lot of useful information. So at the moment, I'm only interested in this. What is this? Well, this is the address to this particular page or this particular repository, I would say, on GitHub. It could look more like a website if you click this other button here that says HTTPS. So now for those used to browsing pages, that looks more like the address of something online. And this other one too is just that it's a special way of expressing where this repository lives. And if you don't know what an SSH key is right now, you shouldn't worry. But that's the option that I'm gonna use because I have done a little bit more work to set that up to make my work a little bit more secure. So I'm going to click this button or just highlight this and copy as you would normally do to have that address on my clipboard, because the next step for me is going to clone that repository, basically to bring it from GitHub to my local computer. And I'm going to use for that just the terminal. So I'm going to open a new terminal. I'm going to make it a little bigger for everyone to see. Actually, let me do this step first, which is to exit from this specially flavored terminal that I usually use, to instead kind of go to a more standard terminal, which is the bash terminal, that for demonstration purposes, I think it makes a bit more sense. So remember, I have in my clipboard the address pointing to that repository, because that is a remote repository. It lives on GitHub. That's the word we use to refer to it, like a remote. So I want to clone this repository using the program git. So what I'm going to type is git, hey git, please. What I want to do is to clone this repository from where? Okay, from this particular address. If you're struggling to paste things on the command line, maybe you need to Google how to do it for your particular system. But in my system, for example, I pasted not with the usual command Control-V, but instead with a special command Shift-Inst. Shift-Inst to paste on my bash terminal. I'm using Ubuntu. So when I press Enter, I see that Git is cloning that repository from GitHub into my local computer. And it is going to basically drop that repository into wherever I am standing at the moment. So I didn't do anything special. I was standing in what's called the home directory of my computer. So that repository should be there right now, right? So one way to kind of query my computer to see what directories and files live in a particular repository, in a particular, directory, is with the command ls. So with ls, now I see that there is a bunch of files in there and directories, in particular this one. No, sorry, it's not the one. This one here, rcollab git, which didn't exist before. Sorry for not showing it before. Just trust me, it didn't exist there before. And we just created it by the process of cloning. So one thing that I would want to do right now is to get inside that directory, which I can do with the command cd, which stands for change directory. So I cd into rcollab. And if you saw me typing too fast, it's actually because I didn't type at all. I just typed the first few letters and then hit the tab key. And I do that not only for speed, but also to avoid typos. So if you are using the terminal, you might want to start using tab quite frequently to avoid making typos. So I changed directory into rcollab-git, press enter, and now you see that the name of the directory where I'm standing appears now on my bash terminal. So if I now do the same thing, ls, I will be querying for any visible file inside that folder. The output should be nothing because that repo is empty, but give me a second because, okay, so if it is empty, what's the magic? What's all about this git thing? Okay, the magic is that there are some files that are hidden. We can query for hidden files with the command or the flag -a for all. So we now see that there is, in particular, this one folder that starts with .git, which is the special folder where Git stores a lot of metadata. So data about the data that you are gonna have in this repository. That's all. All what matters in Git is that particular folder. So the first thing I want to do is to maybe explain what this repository or this folder, if you want to think of it that way, is going to be about. And what is the file that, kind of the community agreed that is a good file to kind of explain such purpose of a project or a file or a repository. Okay, that's the README file that you may have heard about. So I'm going to press caps lock and type, I'm sorry, what I'm going to do is first touch. Touch is a command that allows me to create a new file. So I'm going to do readme.md. MD because I want this to be a Markdown file so that we can type a few syntax as commands, and GitHub will interpret those commands and display them beautifully online. So I touch README. By the way, the terminal is not very flashy. When something works, just nothing happens. So you don't expect a lot of output sometimes. But if I now do ls again, remember ls shows only visible files like README. Now I can see that README is inside there. README is still empty, so it's just an empty file, but I could start typing something in it with using, for example, the nano command, the nano program. Nano is a program that if I type nano and the name of a file, for example, I type RE and then caps lock, and then tab, that auto-completes the file name, and now I press enter, and I'm dropped into this new interface, which is the nano program for me to type something. For example, I can use Markdown syntax to create a first level heading with the pound symbol. Pound symbol in Markdown creates a first level heading. And I can type here, the first thing I would type is probably the name of the repo, which was, can you remind me which the name was it?
It was rcollab-git.
Perfect, thank you.
And you can see afterwards, you're missing a D in README, which you need for the
README, okay.
render on GitHub.
Yeah.
So you can just change that after you edit.
Perfect, thanks a lot. And here what I should type is probably the goal of this repo. Could you explain the goal, John?
It has a practice repository. Yes, for practicing contributing to projects on GitHub. And then the task will be to submit a file with your user named after your username on GitHub with a piece of advice for using R effectively.
Named, how would you phrase it? Named with your name?
Your username, yeah.
Your GitHub username.
Perfect.
And containing something in particular, or just do full
Yeah,
stop?
I'd say, yeah, something like advice about R.
Perfect. Okay. It looks good. If you don't, if you want to change something, you can. That's why we are here for. You can change it later. Submit a pull request. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I want to exit this file and save the changes. So at the lower left, you can see that I can access exit with that hat thing. It means control. So Control X will open this interface that asks me if I want to save the files, and I'm gonna say yes by pressing the Y. And then just enter to save that. So one thing that that was great that John noticed is that this file is not named correctly. So let's change that file name from readme.md to readme. Does that read well now? Yeah, okay. Okay, so if I do an ls, I now confirm that the file now has the new name. So MV stands for move. Basically, you just move a file from one file to the other, which is kind of weird. You would use probably in your file system manager just the command rename or something similar to that. But this is the one that you use here. So okay, I'm ready. I think the first thing I would like to show you before, or the last thing before I send this change up again to the cloud, is to show you how Git knows where to push things to. So I asked Git to show me what's called a remote. I think it's a word I already introduced before. Remote is just an address that is not your local computer, somewhere else. And the way you ask to show that to you in a nice way is with a flag -v, and I use VV, which gives it like a nicer flavor to me. V, I think, stands for verbose. Is that right, John? Verbose, right?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Yeah. So give me everything you know about this remote in a verbose way. So you see the address that I copied from GitHub before is here. Origin is just a nickname for that address, so that you don't have to type that long string of text every time you want to refer to that remote. And just fetch means where things will come from, and push means where things will go to. And life is simple in this scenario, so these two addresses are the same. So I'm ready to go now. I'm gonna check with John before I do it, but I think that I need to just git push. Am I missing something, John, or I'm ready to go?
You got to add and commit.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So I forgot about that. So great that I checked. So the first thing I would do now is git status gives me what's the status of this repository. Remember that folder called .git contains metadata about what I do in my project. So I did add a new file called readme, and now Git knows about that because that's exactly what the job of Git. And it's showing the name of the file in red. Why? Because I haven't really told Git this is a file that I care about, please track it, right? So it's just showing, hey, look, this file is here, but I'm not going to do anything with it unless you explicitly tell me to do so. So what do I need to do? Well, I need to tell Git to add. I could say add the file itself, or I could say add everything that has changed in the last time I told you to do anything, pretty much. Because it's easier for me to type dot than to type the name of the file. That's something I tend to do, but you may want to be a bit more specific and say add this particular file to what's called the staging area. So basically what you're doing is, imagine you're a photographer, you're telling someone, hey, come to my backdrop and stand up there, right? And because I'm going to take a picture. I'm not going to take a picture right now. I'm just going to ask the file to be in that backdrop, against that backdrop. So I have added that file. Again, I'm expecting nothing flashy because that's how the terminal goes. But if I do another status, now you see that the file is displayed in green, which is, okay, Git already knows that this file is something I care about. So the actual way to create a snapshot, to take that picture of the files that you care about against that backdrop, is to do what's called a commit, which is this, you could think of it as this very special way of saving the file. So then you go git commit, and by the way, git commit, and then you have to write a message that's compulsory in Git. It doesn't let you create a commit unless you associate that snapshot with a few words that are meaningful to you. And that's really useful to explain the history of your project. So basically, by creating meaningful commit messages, you are making yourself and everyone else in the project a great favor by being able to track back the history of that commit and explain, what's going on in there. So git commit needs the flag M for message -M, and then in quotation marks, I'm going to write that message. So something like add read me. Now I'm kind of very concerned about my typing. And that's enough, I think. So if I do git status, sorry for my, it says, sorry, I worked a little quickly there, I didn't explain. I cleaned my console to just show the git status that I just typed here at the top. And what you see is that there is nothing to commit. The working tree area is clean. Basically, the only file I was kind of caring about and the only file that I changed is already committed. It's already safely stored in the git commit, in the git folder, right? So now I am ready, right, to push, John? Yes, okay, so I'm gonna do git please push. And what do we want to push and where, basically? Okay, we want to push, sorry, not what, so where do we want to push the new history of this project? Well, we want to push it to our remote. And remember that the name of our remote was origin. Let me show you that again because maybe you forgot. So git remote v will show that origin is the nickname that we use to refer to that remote address on GitHub. So if I want to push there, I have to say git push to origin. And what do we want to push? Well, you say, for this one time, just go with me, you say the flag U to create a permanent link between this local branch of the repository and the remote. And then you say master, because that's the, unfortunately, we can talk about that more later, but master is the default branch of Git repository. And I think that's all good. Git push origin master. Is that right, John?
I don't think you need the -u in this case because you cloned from GitHub. Ah,
okay. Let's try
that. Normally, when you're if you're pushing for the first time, you want to set the default branch, but we don't need to get into that. But and they shouldn't have to do that since they're going to clone. You only need the U if you do it in a certain way. You start it before GitHub.
Perfect. Then I'm gonna go the simpler way because easier the better for now. Okay, let's try that. What I see here is a message that's saying, eventually it is saying that my Git history has been pushed to the address that I wanted. So my username on GitHub and the name of the repo. And I mentioned the word master probably, that was too much detail, but basically what's saying is any project can have a number of different realities, and this one reality, the default reality of a project, is called master. And I'm pushing the default reality from the local repo to the default reality of the remote repository. Okay, that was a bit long of an explanation, but I think that's all I needed to do on my end. Sorry, John, for taking so long.
Now, can you show just the GitHub how it's populated the files?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So I'm back to the window where I showed you how I created that empty repository on GitHub, and it's kind of frozen in that a few minutes ago where I created it. But if I refresh, I would see the current version of this website, right? So when I click refresh, what would you expect to see? You would expect to see the README file that I have just pushed. So let's see if that happens. I just refreshed, and now that ugly page transformed into the beautifully formatted R Markdown syntax that I typed locally on my computer. So I successfully have pushed that README file from my computer to GitHub, and the syntax that I typed, remember that, actually I'm gonna show you the guts of this file by clicking here. So this is what I type on my computer, right? And this is how GitHub beautifully interprets what I typed. Okay, that was the end of my my task for now. John, go ahead and take it on.
Okay, great.
You can share your screen, I guess.
Okay, great. Okay, so in this situation, Mauro was the open source project creator. So what I'm going to do is go through a cycle where, let's say I want to contribute to this project. So I'm going to go to github.com, and either you sign up or you sign in. So I already have an account. So I'm going to save, or I'm logged in. So now I'm going to search for his project. So rcollab-git. So I'm going to search all of GitHub. And here it is, uniquely named. So I click on this. So you can see his project, but this is his project. I can't just go onto somebody's GitHub repository and just make any changes I want. What I have to do is create my own fork, which is sort of my own copy on GitHub of the project that I'm going to edit, and then I will propose my changes to the owner of the repository, so the project creator. So that button's up here at the top. So if you click on that, you probably might only have one account, but when you have multiple accounts, you have to choose, like Mauro was saying. So choose my personal account. And so now up here at the top, it has my username with the same name of the repository, and it says where it was forked from. And so you see now I have everything in here. I have that file. So now I'm going to bring that down to my computer. So you can find that here. And so what I'm going to use is the HTTPS protocol, which means you need to use your username and password. So I'm just going to click right here on the right here to copy paste that. And what I'm going to do is everything from RStudio. So now we're showing you one option is to use the terminal, but RStudio makes it really nice. It can automate all of those things from its interface. What I'm going to do is go to File, New Project. Instead of creating for a new directory, I'm going to say I'm going to do it from version control. And it's a Git. So Subversion is just a different version control software. So this is Git. And so it wants that URL. So I'm going to paste that in there. I'm going to keep the name the same. And I'm going to put it on my desktop just so that way it's easy for me to, okay. Let's see here. Okay, on my desktop. Okay, so I'm going to say create project. And so remember how Mauro in the terminal ran git clone? That's all that RStudio is doing in the background. It's running that git clone command for you. And here at RStudio, we see in the files pane, make it a little bit bigger. You can see his README file here that he had written. And then RStudio assumes, since it's an R project, you're opening RStudio, you might want some other file. So it adds an R project file that's easy for people to open. It also adds this file called a git ignore. It's a special thing for Git. Basically files that you don't want tracked, like your R history and like your user settings. Like no one else in the project really wants to know which files you had open in RStudio at the time. So it ignores all those so that you don't accidentally commit them to the repository. Okay, so like we said, the task is going to be create a new file and add some advice about R. So I'm going to go here, file, new file, and go to text file. And I'm going to say my advice is use the function session info to record the computational environment used for your analysis. Okay, so I'm going to save it. And like I said, we're going to use our GitHub username. So I'm going to just save it that, and then I'm just going to add .txt. So I'm going to save that. Okay, so now I have my file that I want to contribute. And what I could go right now to the terminal and do exactly what Mauro just did. But instead, I'm going to show you the other option of using this Git pane over here. So I'm going to click diff to open up the larger view. OK. So these are all the changes that have been made. And so what happens when I click on them, this is like running git add. So it's saying, OK, this is a file that I want to track in version in my project. And so then it shows up in green that you're going to be adding those. And that's why it has this screen, a status has been added. So I've added these 2 files that RStudio will add it automatically. So when you fork the repository, you won't have to use these again. They'll already be there. And then there's my my file. And so now here's the part where Mauro used the gem flag, but we have this nice little box at our commit message. And so I'm going to say add John's advice. OK. And so what I'm going to do here is press commit. And that's the same as doing git commit. OK, this is important. That's good. That's what I'm doing a demo account. So Git doesn't know who I am. So it wants me to run this in the terminal. I'm going to copy it. Well, let me copy it one at a time. OK, so that's a bit of I'll minimize that. So if you have Git installed on your computer, whether you're using Windows or Mac or Ubuntu, so I'm on a Windows here, so I have Git bash installed. If you click the terminal tab, it opens you in a terminal in that directory. So what I'm going to do is right click and paste. So my email. So you want to use the same email you used to register with GitHub. You don't have to, but that helps keep everything synced in GitHub. OK, so that's my email and then my name. Let's check. OK. OK, so now I've told Git who I am. You can check. Maybe you did Git a long time ago. If you want to confirm, if you do git config-l, it'll show you all the configuration. And most of that's just default stuff. OK, so back to the Git pane. All right. So now if I commit, now it worked because it knows who I am. So it knows who to tell was made the commit. And now instead of doing git push in the terminal, there's RStudio has these buttons to push to GitHub or pull back down. So we're going to do push. Now, since I'm using the HTTPS protocol, that requires a username and password. So you just enter in your username and password, the same one you used to log in. I'm going to log in. All right, so that went through, and so then you can just close that. You can close out of this, and so then we're back here in RStudio. So now we're going to go back to GitHub, so back to my browser, and I'm going to refresh. And so you can see now I've added my commit. You can see over here at the log. So here was Mauro's initial commit. I've added my commit, but nothing's changed on his end yet. And that's because I need to send a request for him to merge my recent changes. So you can see that that is down here. So it says pull request. That's the name of it. So I click on that. What it's going to do is compare the differences. So the only thing that happened that's different is my commit. So it's not going to show his commit again because both my repository and his has that. It shows the files we changed. And so if that all looks good, when you're contributing to whatever project you're contributing to, you write create pull request, another big green button, as Mauro said. And here's where you can say a little message about why you made the change. Mauro already knows, but just to say, hi, Mauro, I added my tip about R. And so then another green button. And so what it's going to do is GitHub is going to send him an email. Mauro is the owner of the project, going to send him an email saying, hey, someone just contributed to your open source project. And so at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Mauro show how he's going to, as the maintainer, review and then merge this pull request.
Thank you. Awesome. That was great. I have actually here your email, and I could merge your request. Could you let me to do that?
Yeah, go ahead and open the pull request in GitHub and show how it merges.
Great. Okay, so can you see my Gmail here?
Yes. Great.
So yes, here we are in my Gmail. I can read already the preview of your PR. The message that you type appears here. I scroll down and I see this hyperlink here to view this on GitHub, which to me is kind of the easiest way to jump right where I want to be. the first thing I usually look for here is, okay, where is this pull request coming from? I can see that it's coming from the master branch of the user JD Blischak. Is that the right way to pronounce your last name?
That's close enough for now.
Close enough for now. And the changes are proposed to be merged into the master branch of my user name. So it makes sense. That's something I check because I often switch between forking and not forking, and that's something I find useful to confirm before I merge anything. And then I would want to have an overview of what he did. I saw him on screen while he was doing it, but that's not the normal scenario. Usually you have a glimpse to what they did just by clicking on the this number that appears right next to the commit message, which gives you that diff that John was showing before. So that allows me to kind of see what happens, and you can even make comments as you would normally do. We say track changes on Google Docs or something like that. So I find that this is a great tip. Thanks. I can add a single comment here. And so that way we could start a conversation about this pull request. Even before we merge it, we may request some changes, but in this case, it looks all good to me. So I think that, the conversation could be resolved. So I'm gonna actually click there to resolve it. But, at any time, we can expand that and see the conversation. So not only the Git itself tracks, the history of the project, but also GitHub then adds this layer where it tracks the conversations that we are having about the changes. So it's like two different levels of the tracking history of the project. So I'm pretty happy with what I see. So I think I will just go here and click on review changes and approve those changes. So that means that the pull request is ready to be merged. And because I am the owner of this particular repository, I have privileges to merge it. So I will just go ahead and click that green button again. Basically, when I approve the pull request, I'm dropped back into this tab. Let me show you the top. Again, we are at this repo. In this case, in my particular account, what we call is the upstream repository of the main repository of this project. I confirm here I'm in the pull request tab. John's pull request looks great to me, and I'm going to go ahead and click merge pull request. I can say something else here, like something like thanks, for example, and then hit here to confirm the merge. So now we see this purple color, which is also particular on GitHub. It tells you that you have actually merged something. So what it means really is that the commits that travel from the master branch of John's project or for John's fork of my project, those commits that, think of a PR as just a vehicle, and that vehicle contains any number of commits from 1 to n. So those commits are now merged where? Into the main branch or the main trunk of this project. So if I go to the main project, go back to where we started, and if I click on commits, now I see 3 commits. What are those 3 commits? The first one, the one that was created when I actually created that README file. Remember that I added that file locally in my computer. Then John added a commit on his computer and pushed it to his fork, and then submitted a pull request that I now pushed. So I now kind of pulled that request from his fork into my source repository and merged them. So that 3rd commit is the merge. You may or may not see that merge commit depending on how you configure things, but for now we shouldn't get into that. So that's all from my end. It all looks good. So I give it back to you, John.
Okay, great. So that's a quick little demo of sort of the cycle from the person creating the project, but more from the contributor side, right? Contributing to that project, making a change locally on your computer, sending it back to your fork on GitHub, and submitting a pull request. So if you're joining us for the live event here this weekend at the Chicago Art Collaborative, your goal is going to be next to make your own fork and follow the directions I just did, which was make a file with your user account name, put in your favorite tip about using R effectively, and send a pull request that then Mauro will merge in if everything looks good. We mentioned various things that we didn't really get into. Branches was one, SSH keys, that sort of thing. If there's something that you want to get set up over this weekend that you're tired of always entering in your password, for example, when you push and pull from GitHub, Mauro and I will be available throughout the time. Feel free to contact one of us, and we can help you get set up to that so that you can use Git more effectively. And with that, I'll thank Mauro for going through this demonstration with me. And yeah, happy contributing.